Reading physical manga is a great way to separate oneself from the digital world, while still being immersed in rich and visually stimulating narratives. I started collecting manga in the beginning of 2022, and my collection is shared between myself and my partner. So there are a few series throughout this collection that I have yet to read, but I do plan to read them in the future. Starting with Shelf 1, Book 1 is Berserk. Currently we've got the first and second volumes of the deluxe editions. The volumes themselves are marvellous with a minimalistic black and red aesthetic. I've not yet consumed any content from Berserk, whether that be the video games, the anime or the manga. However, because it's one of the most highly rated mangas of all time, I do plan on reading it. I wouldn't say Berserk is my usual read, as I usually focus on comedies or slice of life, so I feel like I'm going to have to mentally prepare myself to read this. Next up is Blam. Similar to Berserk, I haven't read the series yet, but as it's a finished series, it's much more higher on my priority list than it is Berserk. Currently on our shelves, we also have volumes 1, 2 and 3. Cats of the Love. I've talked about this manga a lot on my channel and I can't recommend it enough. The physical book is ominously majestic, which definitely reflects in the story. The whole story consists within this one volume, so it's definitely a one and done manga that complements anyone's collection. The last series on this shelf is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which consists of Part 1, Part 2 and the first 2 volumes of Part 3. Personally, I read up to Part 5 and watched up to Part 6, and I found that the art style throughout the whole manga and the anime is so distinct and so prominent, it's nothing that I've ever seen before. If you want more of this art style in your life, but away from Meraki, then I'd recommend following Arcanite Blues on Instagram. They have a very similar style, but it's interesting seeing them do popular characters and even commissions of everyone's original characters. I really enjoy the consistency of each physical volume, however I'm a bit apprehensive of collecting volume 4 onwards, as I know the book's spine design takes a little bit of a different turn. On to the next shelf with Uzumaki. I haven't read too many Junji Ito works as I don't enjoy being particularly spooked. The manga I have consumed from this artist include Uzumaki, Cat Diaries and Dog Diaries. I do plan on consuming more, but I'm a bit anxious about seeing horrific hypnotic depictions within my dreams. Speaking of hypnotic depictions, here are the rest of the Junji Ito works within our collection. It includes Tomi, Gyo, Smashed, Frankenstein, Censor, Venus and the Blind, No Like Human, Dissolving Classroom and Black Paradox. All You Need Is Kill. Similar to Berserk and Blam, I haven't read it yet, but as it's finished, I do plan on reading it. Next is Sinful Toys. Okay, I can explain this one. Actually, matter of fact, I can't. I haven't read this, but I guess I plan to. Let's just say I have an appreciation of female representation in media. I can appreciate the art both in cultured manga and in shonen manga. Next is Monster Romance. Let's just call it another unread cultured art piece and move swiftly forward. Now moving away from the ecchi and more into the romance scene, we now have Monotone Blue. This is a fantastic short story, and I would say that it achieved the anthropomorphic high school romance far better than Beastars did. Not to say that Beastars was bad, I just think I preferred this story over Beastars. A Story of 7 Lives. Since my last video, I have popped over to Forbidden Planet and picked myself up a copy of this manga. I've mentioned the synopsis of this story in a previous video, but as a quick summary, it's an emotional story telling the tale between domesticated and stray cats. Avant-garde Yumiko. The cover was nothing that I'd ever seen before and the blurb was super compelling. I'm still to read it, but it doesn't seem as cultured and as strayed as the other things on this shelf. Birds of Shangri-La. Despite not having read it, this does start the BL section of my collection. When seeing this front cover, I was immediately drawn to it. The purples and the oranges harmonise so elegantly together. Plus, you know, there's a peach on the front cover, so who wouldn't enjoy that on a book? Liquor and Cigarettes. This is done by the same author as Birds of Shangri-La, who really emphasises facial expressions on the front covers. There's something about the way that they draw faces, it's so detailed and so alluring. Next is Secret XXX. It's a surprisingly sweet story despite some very cultured scenes. I recommend picking this up if you want a romantic BL story with a sprinkle of cultured panels. Next up is a book that I can only refer to its alternative name of The Chronicles of Pulau. Out of all the BLs that I've read on and off my physical collection, this is by far the best BL I've ever read. It hones in on that level of shonen ridiculousness that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has, but rather than having stands, they have particular weapons that they use to fight each other with. It's a great laugh and yeah, I'd highly recommend it. I haven't read this book yet, but Dark Dye is the same author as Dolo, which I've heard is fantastic. So I'm hoping that when I open this book it will be also fantastic. We've only got a single volume thus far, but we do plan to increase our collection of this series. Plus-sized elf. I first saw this in the corner of my eye while exploring Forbidden Planet, which is a bookshop in London. It was wrapped up in plastic, which meant that I shouldn't open it, which meant I had to have it. I thought it was going to be about curvy elves romanticizing each other, but instead it was a pretty wholesome story about the battles of food and just dietary needs. As a fellow curvy individual, I found myself relating to the characters quite a lot when it comes to like binge eating or comfort foods or wanting to be healthy but just really not being bothered to do so. This is an absolutely marvellous slice of life story that I'd recommend picking up. The second season of this manga is coming out too, but I want to wait until it's all out before I buy it. Moving on to shelf 3 with Blue Flag. I haven't read this yet, but my partner highly recommends it. The book has a calming yet majestic cover, so it's one I plan to read in the near future. Currently we own volumes 1 and 2, but we're still to collect the future volumes. Drip Drip. Also, I haven't read this yet, but it's written by the same author as Beastars. There's something kind of intriguing about how the author draws faces, both human and animalistic. The big eyes it's kind of hypnotic. The book contains the whole story of Drip Drip, so it's potentially the perfect short story for anyone's collection. I first consumed Hell's Paradise by watching the first season, and then I proceeded to binge the entire manga afterwards because I had to know what happened next. This is a great manga, which I would consider my favourite out of the current Big Dark 3 mangas. The book cover has a lot of hand-drawn elements to it, which I really enjoy, from the sketchy font to the splashes of bright colours in the backgrounds to the hand-drawn pencil aesthetic of the main characters in the foreground. I do plan to collect the rest of the series, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who wants to give it a shot. Tokyo Ghoul. Currently we just had the 1 volume, but next to Terraformers, this was one of the earliest mangas that I read and collected. Speaking of Tokyo Ghoul, here's Tokyo Ghoul Re. Currently we only have 10 volumes, and there's something about the faded art style of Re that I find really draws me in, and it's a unique style that really emphasizes the sadness and emotional numbness that each character carries on their shoulders. Comparing it to Tokyo Ghoul, you can really see the evolution of the artist throughout the different character designs and panels. I'm not one to be into football, despite being from a country that absolutely loves it. However, when I was told it was a more brutal sports manga that breaks every sports trope, I became interested. Currently we have volumes 1, 2, 3 and 4 of Blue Lock, but we do plan to collect a lot more. They're not usually on offer on Forbidden Planet or on Amazon, so they're more like an occasional purchase rather than a frequent shonen purchase. Death Note short stories. I've only ever watched Death Note, both the live action and the anime, and I would love to read the main manga one day, as well as all the short stories in this collection. As of recording this video, the Boxer is the only manhwa that we physically have in our collection. I've never read this manga, but I have read The Horizon, which is another manhwa by this artist. My partner highly recommends this manhwa, and as it's finished, I do plan to read it soon. Josie, the Tiger and the Fish. This is a beautiful love story hitting on the subject of disabilities. The book contains the whole story, and in comparison to A Silent Voice, another romance story with the themes of disabilities, I found that Josie hit me a lot more emotionally. The imagery of this book has great motion and has a wonderful tranquil-like aesthetic. Mermaid Scales in the Town of Sand. I've not yet read this, but as it's a single volume, I do plan to read it soon. There was something about the front cover, it really reminded me of my childhood stories. The inner child in me needed to bring it home and put it in our manga collection. Next is Look Back. This will be a hot take, but I'm not the biggest fan of Chainsaw Man, but I did enjoy Fujimoto's short story. The cover is great, and I would say it is a great addition to anyone's collection. I do also plan to read the other short stories of Fujimoto, seeing as I enjoyed this one so much. We currently own 5 volumes of Dorohedoro. I haven't read it, nor have I watched it. I do plan on reading it as it's a finished story, and Noi is a beautiful buff woman that bumps the series way up in my reading list. A woman that has muscles the size of cars. It's just wonderful. I am a cat barista. I am not, but this is the name of the book. This is a 2-volume manga about a cat barista who makes drinks based on customers' woes. The book itself has a very warming presence, which is reflected in the personality of the barista himself, which you can see throughout the story. My Brain is Different. This was a manga recommended by my partner. I haven't read this yet, but I do look forward to reading about the conditions through the lens of manga. Romantic Killer. We like the look of the cover, so we picked it up. We currently only own the first 3 volumes and we still plan to read it. I previously talked about cat massage therapy on another video, but to summarise, it's basically cute cats providing an array of massages in the most wholesomest of manners. It's only 3 volumes long and we've got all 3 in our collection. Crazy Food Truck. As a manga collector, I do enjoy collecting good short stories. This series I would rank one of the lowest out of our collection of short stories. The title and the bright front covers alluded me to a slice of life story about a food truck in a post-apocalyptic world, but it ended up being less about the food and more about the action. So I wasn't really a fan, but I like the idea of it. The next series is To Strip the Flesh. This is a collection of emotional short stories contained within one book. Personally, out of all the mini stories within this book, I would say my favourite would be the first one. Moving on to shelf 4 with Solanin, that's it. The cover of this manga is reminiscent of multi-textured comic books, while having the distant protagonist stare of the other Inyo Asano pieces, such as Goodnight Mr. Punpun, Sakino, and Regina Into the Deep. Here we have volumes 1 and 2 of Trojan X. As a fan of Ishida's modern artwork, I do look forward to reading this one. I haven't started reading it yet, but I do own a cute necklace that matches the front cover of volume 1. Following Trojan X is My Brother's Husband. Hands down, this is one of my highest rated mangas of all time. This is the quintessential slice of life manga which portrays the reality of Japanese opinions on topics such as the LGBTQI+ community, tattoos, single parenting. It's just great. This book comes in either 2 smaller books, which I currently own, or a large omnibus that has 2 in 1. If you're still unsure about the manga, there is also a live action adaptation, but I'm still to watch it, so I have no idea whether it's good or bad. The 4th series on this shelf is Dan Da Dan. Currently we only own the first 4 volumes. I've been told by my partner in plenty of manga recommendation videos that this is a god tier manga, and from some of the panels, I believe everyone. I do want to wait until this series is finished to start reading it, however the bright colours on each spine makes a wonderful addition to my collection. Next is Monster Wrestling Interspecies Combat Girls. I can't tell whether this manga is actually good or so trash that it is good. This series was surprisingly difficult to find and probably the most expensive series that is completed within my collection. And yeah, if you couldn't tell, it's a pretty edgy one. Next to Monster Wrestling is Jujutsu Kaisen. So I read up to where the anime is at the moment and then I dropped reading it. Not to say it wasn't good, but as I was reading it weekly, the plot point I was on started to drag a smidge. I do have to say Volume 0 has been my favourite out of the franchise thus far of what I have read. Here are volumes 1 to 5 of Sakamoto Days. This is another shonen jump that I plan to read. The premise is super interesting and I've heard good things about it, so it's a definite future must read. Next we have Mashle. I only read Mashle this year, but as a fan of One Punch Man and Harry Potter, I love this series. The manga covers are very reminiscent of the elegant textbooks seen within the Harry Potter franchise. Currently we have up to volume 5, but it would be brilliant to have the rest of the series in the future. Up next is an excellent series that I would consider a great example of modern day shonen. It's Demon Slayer. We try to grab this series when we can, so we've gotten up to 10, but we're currently missing 7, 8 and 9. However, we do have the spin-off volume of Story of Water and Flame. The last book on this shelf is Ayashimon. It's another series made by the same author as Hell's Paradise. I've heard it's not as good as Hell's Paradise, but I am still intrigued to read it at some point. Moving on to shelf 5, or what I would like to call it, the shonen shelf, starting with One Punch Man. We do have most of the series within our collection, but we're currently missing 21, 22 and the most recent volumes. I've only seen the anime, but it would be great to sit down one day and binge the entire series once it's finished. Just seeing a glimpse of some of the modern panels, I just need them in my life. Sitting next to One Punch Man is Slam Dunk. I got into this series by watching the movie that only came out a few months ago, and now I'm hooked. I haven't finished the series yet, but I do want to grab a jersey of each one of the players and just wear them every single day. The series is a little bit old compared to the other books in this collection, but it feels nice to have a quote-unquote vintage series. Last on the shelf is Burn the Witch. I haven't read it yet, but I do vibe with the plaid cover. Moving on to the next shelf with Kaiju number 8. Similar to Burn the Witch, I have no idea what the premise is, and I haven't read it, but we do own volumes 1 to 4. Next is one of my favourite cancelled series, and it's Hunter's Guild Red Hood. I've talked about this in a previous video, and I feel like it's a super cool story that broke the fourth wall about it being a cancelled series. Though Shonen Jump dropped the author, I did want to show my support by having the books on my shelf. Next is That Time I Got Reincarnated as Yamcha. This was kind of a disappointment. I bought it before reading it, and it's fair to say it didn't live up to the hype of Dragon Ball as a whole, but the book is neat to have on the shelf. Now we have Monster Tamer Girls, and it's fair to say it's nothing like Monster Wrestling Interspecies Girls. It's a 2-volume finished series, and it's fair to say it pretty much defines the category of cute girls doing cute things. So I'd recommend picking it up if you want a slice of wholesomeness in your life. Now we have my mini Pirates of the Caribbean collection, which I bet you didn't know existed. In this collection, we've got Dead Man's Chest, At World's End, and The Adventures of Jack Sparrow. Similar to Plus-Sized Elf, I discovered this book by catching it in the glimpse of my eye while browsing Waterstones, and I knew it just had to come home with me. Next is Shaman King. Currently we have the omnibus of 1, 2, and 3, and the omnibus of 7, 8, 9. I understand the basic premise of the story from others describing it to me, but I haven't read it yet, though I am interested to read it one day. Now we have Fujimoto's Before Chainsaw Man books. I've not yet read either one of these books, but after enjoying Fujimoto's other short stories compared to his long stories, I don't see why I wouldn't enjoy these. I recommended Puppy Love in my 5 random manga recommendation video. It's a super sweet 1-volume love story that had a strange backstory for one of the characters that I didn't feel was super necessary, but nonetheless the cover is just as sweet as the story inside it. Zarzan and Comet Girl. Next to My Brother's Husband, this has to be one of my favourite series of all time. It's a short romance adventure that I would happily describe as Uncharted but in space. And the great thing about the book is that it was completely published in colour. Giant Spider and Me. This is a manga I found while rummaging on the pets tag on AniList. It's only 3 volumes long and it fleshes out the topic of building friendships through the power of food. I'm not sure where this lies on the arachnophobia scale, but the author tried their best to portray Asa the spider as a soft and caring creature. Last on the shelf is I Wanna Eat Your Pancreas. It's another short story that I plan to read. I do however find the front cover to be very tranquil and inviting. On the bonus shelf away from the main collection is Dragon Ball. I can proudly say that I'm a big old Dragon Ball fan. The series is fantastic and I would recommend it to anyone who's trying manga for the first time. We have all the omnibus collections of the original Dragon Ball, which includes Dragon Ball Z. However, we're holding out on collecting Super until there is an omnibus version. And that's it, that's the manga collection. Despite having a relatively large collection, it's kind of funny how much I haven't actually read. Either way, I hope you found some interesting recommendations from my collection, or just question my taste in general. Now I'm off to get some limb sips, as that was a whole bunch of talking. Okay, bye!